Sioux warriors versus U.S. Army, the battle for Bozeman. Welcome to Native Legends and History Stories. Join us as we uncover the untold tales of America's great frontier. Subscribe now to journey through time and witness the clash of cultures that shaped the American West. In 1863, two worlds collided on the vast plains stretching from Bismarck to Bozeman, where the mighty Yellowstone River carved its path through untamed wilderness. This wasn't just a story of a trail. It was the story of the last desperate struggle between two ways of life, one fading, one advancing, neither willing to yield to the white settlers. Pushing westward, these endless prairies represented nothing but worthless wasteland. The land between the Platte River and Canada stood empty of ranches, empty of settlements, empty of everything they valued. Their indifference to the region ran so deep that one old-timer, watching his wife battle a grizzly bear, remarked he'd never witnessed a fight whose outcome interested him less. Such was the settler's mindset. This was merely territory to be crossed, an obstacle between them and the riches of the West. But for the Crow people, these rolling hills and flowing rivers were paradise. Itself, their chief Arapahoe spoke with profound conviction to Washington Irving. The Crow country is a good country. The Great Spirit has put it exactly in the right place. While you are in it, you fare well. Whenever you go out of it, whichever way you travel, you fare worse. Yet, even the sacred homeland faced threats from all sides, as Sioux and Cheyenne warriors themselves, pushed by expanding white settlements in the east, pressed into Crow territory. Drawn by the promise of abundant horses, this was the Indians' last best hunting ground. Protected on paper by the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1851, the agreement guaranteed native rights across vast stretches of Wyoming and Montana, though it contained one crucial clause, allowing the United States to establish roads, military, and other posts. Many tribal leaders believed this treaty would keep white settlers out entirely. For 10 years it did. Then, gold was discovered in southwestern Montana in 1862, and everything changed. A white man proposed cutting a wagon route through Indian territory, connecting the Oregon Trail to the northern mountains. The more perceptive tribal leaders foresaw the inevitable. They had witnessed how the arrival of white settlers elsewhere had decimated the buffalo herds their people depended on. This final sanctuary could not be surrendered. Into this powder keg rode John Bozeman, a bold adventurer from Georgia, seeking to map a wagon route in 1863. He barely escaped with his life. The road he eventually established, against fierce Indian resistance and maintained by government force, sparked a brutal conflict that would define the trail's early history. Though the Bozeman Trail's glory days lasted just for years, from 1864 until the Union Pacific Railroad's arrival in 1868, its brief existence changed the American West forever. The Bozeman Trail became the stage for some of the most significant confrontations between native tribes and white settlers, marking both the Indians' final victories and the beginning of their eventual defeat. At the center of this conflict stood John Bozeman, whose ambition and determination would reshape the American frontier. At just 25 years old, Bozeman abandoned the comforts of his Georgia home, driven by dreams of striking gold in Montana territory. The harsh realities of mining life quickly dampened his enthusiasm. Endless hours spent knee-deep in frigid mountain streams, back-breaking labor of moving tons of gravel, and the constant battle against the elements for minimal returns. This grueling experience sparked a different kind of entrepreneurial spirit in the young adventurer. Bozeman's keen eye recognized the untapped potential of the Gallatin Valley. Beyond the immediate allure of gold, he envisioned a thriving agricultural settlement. Working tirelessly, he transformed his vision into reality, establishing a flour mill to process local grain, constructing a toll road for reliable travel, and operating a ferry service across the treacherous Yellowstone River. His small hotel became a gathering point for travelers and settlers alike, while his farming operation north of Main Street demonstrated the valley's agricultural possibilities. In spring 1863, Bozeman embarked on his most ambitious venture, mapping a direct route from the Oregon Trail to the Montana gold fields. His companions were an unlikely pair: John M. Jacobs, a seasoned mountain man hardened by years on the frontier, and Jacobs' 11-year-old daughter, born to his Flathead Indian wife. The choice of bringing a child on such a perilous journey reflected the complex family dynamics of frontier life. Their expedition met its first major challenge. Near the Big Horn River, a band of Crow warriors, though generally more tolerant of white settlers than other tribes, seized the opportunity to raid the small party. The warriors stripped them of horses, supplies, and equipment in a particularly cruel twist. They singled out Jacob's young daughter, beating her with a ramrod as punishment for associating with white men. A stark illustration of the cultural tensions that plagued the frontier. Despite nearly starving to death, Bozeman's resolve remained unshaken. By July 1st, he had assembled an impressive wagon train along the North Platte River. The caravan consisted of 45 wagons, primarily pulled by sturdy oxen, and 90 well-armed men, according to James Kirkpatrick's detailed records. Each man carried enough ammunition for 425 rounds of continuous fire, a testament to the dangers they anticipated. The confrontation came on July 20th near the Big Horns. A large force of Sioux and Cheyenne warriors materialized on the ridgeline, their presence both a warning and a threat. Their message was unambiguous: turn back and live, or continue and face certain death. Despite Bozeman's passionate argument that their superior numbers and firepower would prevail, the majority of travelers chose survival over adventure. They turned their wagons around. Bozeman's response revealed his extraordinary determination. Rather than abandon his dream, he gathered a small group of like-minded adventurers. Together they continued toward Virginia City, adopting guerrilla-style tactics, traveling under cover of darkness and hiding during daylight hours to evade hostile patrols. This initial setback only fueled Bowman's resolve. By January 1864, he was back in Virginia City, organizing another expedition. His persistence paid off. The second attempt succeeded, with his wagon train reaching Gallatin Valley in August. This triumph opened the floodgates as more emigrants and freight carriers began regularly using the trail. However, this increase in traffic sparked intense resistance from native tribes. Warriors employed sophisticated tactical warfare, stealing livestock to immobilize wagon trains, conducting lightning raids to capture horses, setting ambushes for isolated travelers, and leaving grim warnings for others who might follow. The violence spread beyond the trail itself, with attacks targeting railroad construction crews, telegraph lines, and mail routes across the northern plains. Throughout 1864 and 1865, military efforts to suppress this resistance proved futile, as the tribe's superior knowledge of the terrain and guerrilla tactics repeatedly thwarted conventional military responses. Peace negotiations crumbled from their foundation. The white negotiators failed to grasp a crucial aspect of tribal society. There existed no centralized leadership structure, with the authority to make binding decisions for all bands and groups. Each warrior band maintained its autonomy, making any formal agreement essentially meaningless. Without universal consent, the trail transformed into a gauntlet of death, particularly in Sioux territory. Perry A. Burgess's 1866 journal painted a haunting picture of the dangers that lurked along every mile. His entries chronicled a steady stream of violence. August 3rd revealed the fresh graves of a French trader and his 4 companions, their bodies still warm from a recent Indian attack. The very next day, they passed the skeletal remains of a plundered wagon, its contents scattered and destroyed. August 7th brought them to another grim marker: a hastily dug grave of a traveler, killed just days before their arrival. By August 11th, their frustrated attempts to ford the Big Horn River led them to discover more graves of Indian victims, silent testimonies to the trail's deadly nature. The mountain casualties forced the federal government's hand. In 1866, under intense pressure from Montana residents, and concerned about protecting their substantial investment in the Union Pacific Railroad's construction crews, officials authorized a chain of forts along the trail. Command fell to Colonel Henry B. Carrington, a complex figure whose reputation preceded him. Though his 18th Infantry had distinguished itself in the Civil War, Carrington himself had never seen combat, earning him the derisive label, desk soldier among his peers. Now he arrived at Fort Laramie with over 700 troops, his timing coinciding with delicate negotiations between government officials and the formidable Sioux leader, Red Cloud. The arrival ignited an explosive confrontation. Red Cloud, renowned for both his military prowess and political acumen, immediately recognized the government's duplicity. In a moment that would be recorded in multiple historical accounts, he pointed an accusatory finger at Carrington, his voice thundering with barely contained rage. "You are White Eagle who has come to steal the road. The Great Father sends us presents and wants us to sell him the road, but the White Chief comes with soldiers to steal it. Before the Indians say yes or no, I will talk no more." This incident revealed the deep divisions within American society regarding Indian policy. Margaret Carrington, the colonel's wife, captured this complexity in her book Absaroka, Home of the Crows. Her surprising sympathy for Red Cloud's position, particularly coming from an Army commander's wife, reflected the growing national debate. The memory of the Sand Creek Massacre in 1864, where the 3rd Colorado Volunteers had slaughtered nearly 200 Indians, many of them women and children, still haunted the national conscience. Eastern liberals and much of the press championed Indian rights, while frontiersmen and military personnel often advocated for more aggressive measures. Undeterred by the diplomatic breakdown, Carrington pressed forward with military precision. However, his letters to superiors revealed deep concerns about his mission's viability. He repeatedly requested additional supplies and reinforcements, particularly emphasizing critical ammunition shortages. Despite these limitations, he launched an ambitious construction program. His first move strengthened the existing Fort Rincon on the Powder River. Then, pushing deeper into contested territory, he established Fort Philip Kearny on the eastern flank of the Big Horns, south of modern-day Sheridan, Wyoming. His most daring move, sent to companies 90 miles northward to construct Fort C.F. Smith, where the Big Horn River emerged from the mountains. This last outpost would become notorious as the most isolated military installation in the region, its garrison perpetually surrounded by hostile forces. October 1866 brought an unexpected figure to the Big Horn country, Nelson Story, a man whose determination would reshape Montana's cattle industry. Unlike the desperate gold seekers flooding the territory, Story approached the frontier with calculated business acumen. 3 years of methodical mining had yielded him $40,000 in gold dust, a fortune he wasn't willing to risk on further speculation. Story executed a bold financial maneuver. He traveled to New York City, converting his hard-earned gold into government-backed currency. After securing the majority in a bank, he took $10,000 in cash, meticulously sewing it into his overcoat lining. This hidden fortune funded his journey to Texas, where he purchased 1,000 head of longhorn cattle, lean, hardy beasts bred for survival. The cattle drive north tested every ounce of Story's resourcefulness. With a carefully selected crew, he guided the massive herd across challenging terrain. Until they reached Fort Phil Kearny, their Colonel Carrington delivered a stark warning. "You can't go on up there, those Indians will kill you." While forcing Story to halt, Carrington paradoxically refused to let the herd graze near the fort, preserving the grass for military horses. Stranded 3 miles from the fort's protection, Story's instincts screamed danger. After an urgent council with his men, they made a decisive choice. Under cover of darkness, they drove the entire herd forward, defying both military orders and the threat of Indian attacks. Their gamble paid off spectacularly. Story established the Yellowstone Valley's first major cattle operation, later supplementing his longhorn stock with premium beef breeds to improve the bloodline. Story's success elevated him to prominence in Bozeman's growing community, where he developed a close association with John Bozeman himself. When Bozeman met his violent end in 1867, reportedly at the hands of Blackfoot warriors in a narrow canyon near the Yellowstone, Story honored his friend by commissioning the monument that still marks his grave above the town. The Story family ranch, a testament to one man's vision, continues operations into modern times. The remarkable aspect of Story's cattle drive wasn't just its success but its relative peace. Only 2 minor Indian confrontations marred the journey. However, this tranquility, mass-gathering storms in the Big Horn country, as winter settled in, Indian warriors, well provisioned with dried buffalo meat, began plotting a major offensive against Carrington's forces. Carrington's superiors pressured him to take aggressive action against the raiders. This order exposed the fatal flaw in his command. His soldiers, though numerous, lacked the specialized training needed to combat the Indians' guerrilla tactics. December 6, 1866 proved this point brutally. While leading a relief force to protect woodcutters, Carrington barely escaped an elaborate ambush that claimed the lives of an officer and a veteran sergeant. The situation deteriorated rapidly. Between December 16th and 19th, Indian warriors maintained near constant pressure, appearing daily around the wood, gathering parties and testing the fort's defenses. Then on December 21st, when the woodcutters again came under attack, Carrington deployed a substantial force, 78 officers and men under Captain William Federman's command. The mission attracted 2 additional participants, a pair of civilian volunteers and Captain Frederick H. Brown's presence proved particularly fateful. Though under orders to report to Fort Laramie, he chose to join Federman's expedition, driven by personal ambition to capture an Indian scout. This decision would have far-reaching consequences for everyone involved. Colonel Carrington's orders rang clear. Under no circumstances was Federman to pursue Indians beyond Lodge Trail Ridge, the same ground where Carrington himself had narrowly escaped death weeks earlier. Yet Federman, his judgment, perhaps clouded by years of Civil War victories, believed his battle experience would prevail in this unfamiliar territory. His fatal miscalculation began when his troops pursued what appeared to be a small group of Sioux warriors. As they crested the Forbidden Ridge, they rode directly into a masterfully orchestrated trap. 3,000 warriors concealed in the surrounding terrain launched a coordinated assault that would become legendary in frontier warfare. Carrington's official report painted a grim tableau of the aftermath. Lodge Trail Ridge became a field of death, littered with the evidence of the desperate final stand. Countless arrows, broken spear shafts, and scout poles marking where the fierce battle had raged. The pattern of spent arrows revealed how completely the Indian forces had encircled their prey. The discovered bodies bore terrible signs of mutilation, except for Federman and Brown. True to Brown's often stated intention, they were found with matching revolver wounds to their left temples, choosing a swift death over the prospect of torture. This devastating defeat stood as the U.S. Army's most catastrophic loss to Native American forces in the West, unmatched until Custer's infamous last stand at Little Bighorn. A decade later, in 1876, though Carrington faced disgrace and transfer, the true fault lay in the military's fundamental misunderstanding of frontier warfare. The aftermath brought bitter ironies. The forts finally received the reinforcements and modern breech-loading rifles Carrington had desperately requested. Through 1867, the Indian forces launched 2 more major offensives against Forts C.F. Smith and Phil Kearny, but the better-equipped garrisons repelled these attacks. Yet this military success came at a staggering price. Government accountants calculated each Indian casualty cost the Army $100,000. Draining resources already depleted by the Civil War. General Sherman's assessment proved prophetic. The Bozeman Trail and its fortifications, built at such terrible human cost, lost their significance as the Union Pacific Railroad pushed westward. By 1868, the Army abandoned its posts along the trail. Fort C.F. Smith's walls crumbled into the prairie. Indians burned Fort Phil Kearny to the ground, while Fort Reno vanished in prairie fire flames. The native tribes had defended their last, great hunting ground, but their victory marked more than just a military